Windfury is part of the reason Shamans were infamous back in vanilla WoW as the overpowered class. The other reason being its shocks, which I covered in a different video. In Windfury's first form, it was a weapon enchant that gave Shamans a 20% chance per hit with the weapon it was on to grant 2 to 4 extra attacks with improved attack power, with a 5-minute duration. It was quickly changed in vanilla to only grant 2 extra attacks, and its duration increased to 30 minutes, because 5 minutes was hella short even for vanilla standards. Before patch 1.4, Windfury could proc off of itself, as could all other weapon and enchant based procs like the Fiery Weapon enchant or Crusader. What this meant was that theoretically you could have a hit go off that would continuously proc off of itself until the target died in an instant, as all the extra attacks happened pretty much right away. Of course, you rarely saw this as the chance for this to happen was just too small, and the fact that most Shamans played Resto. In the same time period, Shamans also had a totem which could give all their party members a mini Windfury buff, which gave them a 20% chance on weapon hits to trigger 1 extra attack with increased attack power, instead of 2 hits like the normal Windfury buff. And yes, the totem was actually pretty good, and actually saw use in PvE, unlike enhanced Shamans. But then in the 1.4 patch, the chance to trigger Windfury off of itself was removed, but you could still trigger other procs off of it, so it was still possible to have things like 3 Crusader procs to go off at once. Crusader was a really powerful vanilla enchant that gave you a crap ton of strength and healed you for a bit on each proc. It's also a nice enchant to just put on heirloom weapons today. Since Windfury procced 2 extra attacks with increased attack power, if you wanted to do many periods of burst damage, it was best to use the hardest hitting, slowest two-handed weapon you could find. With just an average strength, slow two-hander, it was possible to one-shot Clothies in PvP with a Windfury proc. But there was a Shaman in vanilla WoW who managed to get the legendary two-handed weapon Sulfuras, and made a video of him going into a battleground and one-shotting all kinds of players with Windfury procs, and not just Clothies. Windfury was a great weapon enchant for Shamans, but only really if you had good gear. Before a certain point, you'd do more damage with Rockbiter weapon, the starter weapon enchant, so to speak. But the good times would not last. In patch 1.11, towards the tail end of vanilla, Windfury was nerfed as its bonus attack power and the 2 extra hits was cut in half, making it the worst Shaman weapon enchant. But people still found a way to make it work somewhat. With dual wielding though, two-handed Windfury died with this patch. You see, back in the day, all specs and abilities had ranks to them, and it was common practice to sometimes use lower ranks of spells if you only needed its bonus effect and not the damage or something. Like Frost Mages would use rank 1 Frostbolt for its slow effect, and because it had a lower cast time than its max rank. Or how Shamans would also use rank 1 Earthshock if they only needed its interrupt effect, not its damage. But Shamans could simply apply the highest rank of Windfury to their main weapon, and then apply the second highest rank to their offhand weapon, and have double chances at Windfury procs. Since Windfury was given an internal cooldown of 3 seconds, meaning it couldn't trigger more than once every 3 seconds. This internal cooldown was not shared with its lower ranks though, so you essentially had 2 different ICDs for both of your weapons, and could live in Proc City once again. All the way until the Burning Crusade in patch 2.1 anyway, when Blizzard made all ranks share an internal cooldown. Now, this didn't really kill Windfury per se, just kind of made it mediocre. And then after that, there was no real major changes to Windfury after the 2.1 nerfs until Myths, other than attack power modifiers to its bonus damage, and glyphs and talents that gave it extra chance to procs or do more bonus damage on its 2 hits. In Myths of Pandaria, Windfury was made enhance only and was given 3 extra attacks, up from 2, making it slightly more useful since its nerfs at the end of vanilla. In Legion, Windfury was turned into a passive ability enhanced Shamans just have, without having to put a buff on their weapons like they used to. It now has a 10% chance on main hand hits to do 2 extra attacks for 80% normal damage. Shamans also got their old Windfury totem back in Legion as a PvP talent. While in vanilla, Windfury totem used to give a chance at 1 extra attack for melee users, It was later changed to just a melee haste buff, and then later again to just a general haste buff before being removed. The reason its old effect was changed to just a normal haste buff was because the effect was crazy strong if used on a group of melee DPS with slow two-handed weapons. Its ability today is to give all your allies within 10 yards of the totem a 40% chance to do 3 extra attacks. So its PvP effect today is actually stronger than its old vanilla effect, only it's a cooldown based ability tied to a 5 health totem that's easy to kill. So it's really not as useful as its vanilla counterpart, which could be used in raids and was more or less a permanent buff as long as you stayed close to the totem and the shaman remembered to reapply it on cooldown. And that's it for Windfury. If you have an idea for an interesting ability to cover next, just leave it as a comment on this video, and check the playlist to make sure I haven't already covered it, which will be linked at the end of this video.